Hi everyone, welcome back to Paisa Bolta. Yes, it's me Vinod, and yes, it's now going to be in Hindi. If I spoke in Hindi, you guys would probably have this channel banned. My Hindi is that terrible when it's spoken. I do understand Hindi, but unfortunately, I did not have a chance to practice my spoken Hindi because by the time I came to my family, my sister and my brother became very proficient in Hindi, like my father and my mother, and I was not given an opportunity to practice my spoken Hindi with them because none of them had the patience to listen to me try and practice Hindi. So who knows? Maybe one day I'll surprise you and actually get a tutor to help me with my Hindi, my spoken Hindi that is, and I might astound you by doing this whole thing in Hindi. Well, that day is not today, unfortunately. So Anand is not here, and I didn't want you guys to miss out on having something to watch. Those of you who do watch this channel, the few of you who are followers of Paisa Bolte, I wanted to give out some of my thoughts maybe for the year 2024, what the investing landscape looks like. Sector wise, I just wanted to break it down and where I see opportunities as a value investor. And maybe you can look at that as something to give you some insight into, or maybe you feel inspired by what I'm saying and you dive into that sector and see some value to be found there. First thing I want to talk about is banking and financial sector. Given the expected challenges in the banking sector, especially with consumption and lending and borrowing slowing down, as a value investor, look into banks for financial institutions which have a strong track record in commercial, industrial, infrastructure lending is what I would feel. Sectors that are expected to grow in 2024, which is commercial, industrial, infrastructure lending. Public sector banks that may seem benefit from treasury gains and potential interest rate cycles turning lower could also be of interest to you guys, provided that they manage their capital efficiently and avoid diluting share value excessively, which you've seen PSU banks do this before in the past. So keep an eye out. Like I said, banking sector, those are the things as a value investor I would look at, and maybe you can find some opportunities there. As far as NBFCs are concerned, that is non-banking financial companies, I would focus on this sector only because I would actually look at it too much because there's slower growth expectations because of housing and infrastructures and commercial expectations in these are not so great. And the present value, though they may look undervalued in this market, they need to have solid fundamentals and a good growth outlook for me to pique my interest in. And right now, NBFCs, other than of course the gold NBFCs, the rest of them I'm talking about. Gold NBFCs, the Muthoot and the Manappuram, they're pretty much like buying gold. And Anand has spoken in great length why it's like buying gold, buying those companies. So I would not club them with this, but of course, technically speaking, they are NBFCs. Consumer durables and staples with long-term views is what I feel. This sector will be facing a lot of short-term competitive pressure and high demands. However, consumer durables and staples, in the long run, I feel this has a strong brand value, the companies which are present in this. And if they have managed their supply chains efficiently, especially with this, what's happening in the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, I don't know if you guys read that article about what's happening in that supply chain segment. If you haven't, please do read. They're expecting at least 20 to 30% in freight cost and shipping cost because of what's happening there. And that pressured with inflationary pressures and climate conditions. So this needs to be looked at carefully, but I do feel that there is some value there in some of these companies if you look at it carefully. Automobile sector and structural is going through a structural shift. That's because of premiumization. Premiumization is companies which are targeting lower income and middle income families now are focusing more on the higher end of the K because that's where the recovery is, and they all seem to be heavily banking on that sector. That's why you see an explosion in SUVs in India, and in all car manufacturers they seem to be focusing on that. Then of course electrification of cars, EV explosion is happening in India right now, in two-wheelers also, and there seems to be revival in that sector in terms of growth. So again, as a value investor, if you go through this carefully, I'm sure allied industries to automotives and automotive companies, some of them could be interesting to look at this year if you do find value in those dips. So I would suggest you to go through it. Some of them may be even undervalued, so keep an eye out. Sector number 5 would be the technology and export sector. I would say be very cautious in this sector because of the way Indian rupee and the dollar is. So you have to keep an eye on that. Yes, the rupee is weak compared to the dollar, and what's happening globally also you have to keep an eye on in terms of macroeconomics and in terms of what's happening in the election cycles in the US and what is happening in Europe and their economy, because export is mainly profitable export is mainly towards these two sectors, the American sector and the European sector. So keeping an eye on this on a macro level is important because these companies have strong revenues from these two sectors. So keep an eye out. If you are looking into this, especially in value proposition, make sure you know what you're doing. Even IT companies right now are very sluggish, and some of them are struggling with layoffs and internal dynamics changing in the company in terms of management, in lower level, mid-level managements also. So keep an eye out and make sure if you are diving into it that you're looking at it in the long view. Cement and construction, yes, right now pretty grim right now because the real estate is pretty grim. But if you're looking at it long term, I don't know. Even there, I find this right now this sector not a great sector because first of all, cement is something me and Anand don't look at because government regulations is all over it. So we tend to give it a miss. And construction, real estate right now is in doldrums in India unless we see some huge correction or some kind of reviving happening in that sector by government intervention, both of which are not happening. So even in long-term growth, I don't know. Yes, eventually everything grows. No denying that. I'm sure everything will grow eventually. But the point is, I should be there when the growth happens. And do I see potential of growth somewhere else, better growth somewhere else, is my argument. So if you are a person who's always batted on cement in construction and it's in your wheelhouse and it's in your circle of competence and you have great confidence in that, all I'm saying is see in other sectors too and see the returns those other sectors offer before you decide to dive into this. So aside from this, what I would take careful consideration is, like I said before, keep an eye out on global events and macro events. There are election cycles happening throughout the world. If I'm right, there are around 90 elections happening this year around the world. Keep an eye out on that. Then, of course, keep an eye out on the regional conflicts which are happening, like in the Middle East and in the Ukraine. Right, it seems to be a seesaw what is going on. Sometimes it looks like the conflict is going spiraling out of control. And there are days and times when the conflict looks like it's simmering down. So I would suggest that you keep an eye out on all this and see what is happening. Even Japan, for instance, because the rest of the world looks rather bleak and China is looking very, very bleak, there's a lot of capital inflow happening from outside into Japan, pushing its markets to never seen highs, at least in most of your lifetime. In my lifetime, I must have been a small child when these markets were like that. I don't remember that, of course, because I was a small child. But for some of you wouldn't have even been born the last time the Japanese markets were at these levels. So if you are venturing out into outside India, do keep an eye out in what you're putting your money into. Blindly do not just drop coin everywhere. Try and see value in whatever you're doing. These principles are very important, and the reasons why they're important, they're time and tested principles of value investing. I hope you found this information informative and entertaining at least. Thanks for watching the video on Paisa Bolta today, and I hope Anand will be here in a couple of days. Thank you.
नमस्कार, फिर पैसा बोलता है में आपका स्वागत है। इस फरवरी के अंतिम हफ्ते मैं दुबई में हूँगा। जो मुझे दुबई में मिलना चाहे 24 और 25 फरवरी में मैं दुबई में इवेंट करने वाला हूँ। जो भी दुबई, अबू धाबी, शारजा और अन्य एमिरेट्स में हैं और मुझे मिलना चाहते हैं वो मुझे मिल सकते हैं। नीचे एक व्हाट्सएप नंबर है, ईमेल है और एक गूगल फॉर्म है, उसको इस्तेमाल कीजिए मैं और फिल इन कीजिए। मेरे टीम आपसे संपर्क करेगा। धन्यवाद, नमस्कार, जय हिंद।